Hi, my name is Nikki, and welcome to my channel where I discuss murder, mystery, and strange things that interest me and hopefully interest you too. Today we will be looking into the first recorded serial killer in Canadian history. Clifford Robert Olson Jr., aka the Beast of BC, was born January 1st, 1940, to parents Clifford Sr. and Leona Olson. The oldest of 4 children, Clifford grew up in a modest home in Richmond, BC, and he was said to have had a normal childhood, but was remembered to have always been a bully who also tormented small animals. Clifford as a child was also known as a petty thief and often stole from neighbors and tried to sell the goods back to the original owners. In his teenage years, he studied boxing and then used his knowledge to beat up people who had tried to bully and lost fights to in the past. His boxing coach, Tommy Ewell, only had positive things to say about Clifford. He was a runner-up of the Bronze Gloves in 1954 and got awarded as the most sportsmanlike boxer in 1958 in a Golden Gloves tournament. Clifford dropped out of school after grade 8 and lived at home until his first arrest for break and enter at the age of 17. His first arrest in 1957 would see him sentenced to 9 months in jail. During this time, he escaped and was captured after stealing a powerboat. Clifford actually managed to escape 7 times during his many stints in prison, but never for very long as he was quickly recaptured. Over the next 24 years, Clifford chalked up at least 83 convictions, most of them having to do with theft, fights, and sexual assault. One time when he was in prison, he was stabbed by a gang of prisoners for informing the guards about a drug smuggling deal that was supposed to go down. For this, he managed to persuade the Saskatchewan Criminal Compensation Board to award him $3,500 because of his moral and physical courage. Remember this, as this won't be the last time Clifford uses information for monetary gain. By the time Clifford Olson Jr. was 41 years old, he had only spent about 4 years of his adult life as a free man. He then met his wife, Joan Hale, February 1980. Joan apparently fell in love instantly. They were living together 3 days after they met, and they were married May 15, 1981, just about a month after their son was born. Now, unbeknownst to Joan, at the time of their wedding, he had already murdered 3 children. One only 5 days after their son was born. Clifford's first victim was Christine Weller. She was a tomboyish 12-year-old girl who was riding home on a bike on November 17, 1980. She was on her way home after an afternoon out with her friends that was spent checking out the new edition of the Surrey Mall. At around 5 p.m., she realized she was going to be late for dinner, so she borrowed her friend's bike and headed back to the Bonanza Motel where she lived with her parents. It was about a 3-minute ride. Her parents assumed that Christine was just staying at a friend's house since she had done that before, and because of this, it wasn't a new thing that her parents were concerned about, and it took a few days to file a missing persons report. At first, the police treated her as a runaway. It wasn't until the bike she was riding was found behind an animal clinic that everyone realized something was horribly wrong. Christine's body would be found on Christmas Day by a man who was out walking his dog. She was found at the back of a dump along the Fraser River in nearby Richmond. She had suffered multiple stab wounds and had been strangled with a belt. The next girl to go missing was Pauline Marion Degnaud. She was a 13-year-old girl with long brown hair. She went missing on April 16th. She was waiting for one of the 2 buses that would take her home after spending the night at a friend's house. Her grandmother was expecting her home around 4 p.m. While waiting at the bus stop around 1, a car pulled up and caught her attention. She never made it home. 3 days later, Pauline was reported missing. Again, the Mounties treated her as a runaway. 5 months later, on September 17th, her skeletal remains were found in an isolated part of a Surrey forest. About 6 days after Pauline went missing, 16-year-old Darren Todd Johnstrud vanished. He was on an Easter break and had been flown out to British Columbia by his mother, as a birthday present. He was looking forward to spending time with his younger brother and sister. Darren lived with his father in Saskatchewan and was planning on going back there to finish school before making the permanent move to BC to live with his mother and find work. At the time, unknown to anyone, Darren's mother lived only half a block away from Clifford. Darren was last seen at a nearby store buying cigarettes. She left her boyfriend's mother's house and was trying to hitchhike her way to the body shop where he worked to bring him some lunch. Her boyfriend's mother recalled seeing her get into a silver gray two-door car with a man. Clifford persuaded Sandy to go with him to his cabin in the woods. Once there, he killed her by hitting her in the head from behind with a rock. Clifford stated later that he was angry to only find $10 on her when she had stated she had $100. Once again, this was filed as a runaway by police. Clifford Olson wouldn't strike again until June 21st. Ada Court was a 13-year-old from Burnaby and had just spent the night babysitting for her brother and sister-in-law. That Sunday morning, she left to catch the bus to meet her boyfriend. Then she disappeared. A man named Jim Parento believed he may have seen Olson burying the body. Around 8 p.m. on June 21st, he saw a man beside a black pickup looking at a teenage girl on the ground. Thinking they might need assistance, Jim stopped to help, but found it strange when the man wouldn't answer him and decided to leave. Olson gave chase, and Jim was only able to get away by swerving onto a logging road. Clifford's next victims would all die in quick succession. July 2nd, 1981, Simon Parrington would disappear. This was a turning point in the case because the 9-year-old couldn't be classified as a runaway. He was immediately reported as abducted. At about 10:30 a.m. after breakfast, Simon hopped on his bike with his Snoopy book in the bicycle basket and headed over to his friend's house. He disappeared only a few blocks from where Christine Weller was last seen alive. Simon's disappearance started a public outcry and a manhunt was started. Simon ended up in a remote part of Richmond where he was sexually assaulted and strangled. We now come to his next victim, Judy Kozma. She was a 15-year-old girl who was on her way to Richmond to see a friend and apply for a job at Wendy's on July 9, 1981. She had met Clifford through her job at McDonald's, so when he offered her a ride, he was already a familiar face. Unlike his other victims, there was an eyewitness to her last known hours of life. 18-year-old Randy Ludlow was a passenger in Clifford's car when he picked up the girl. They drank beers in the car on the way to Richmond and ended up arriving there way too early for her interview. Clifford decided to stop at the Richmond Inn to finish off the beers and then moved on to harder alcohol. According to Randy, Clifford kept trying to have him make Judy stronger drinks even though she didn't want them. Randy said that he just pretended to make drinks, but only gave her Coke. After a while, Clifford gave Judy some little green pills and told her that they would sober her up. They then left and made a stop at Clifford's home. While waiting in the car, Randy reported that this was the only time he saw Judy upset and crying, but he thought it was because she was scared that she missed her interview and was too intoxicated. According to Randy, Judy pulled herself together before Clifford returned to the car. Randy was then dropped off at the Lougheed Mall. The next day, Clifford took his family on a trip to Knott's Berry Farm in Los Angeles and didn't return until July 21st. Judy's body was discovered July 25th near Weaver Lake. After his return home and just days before Judy's body was found, Clifford struck again. This time his victim was Raymond King Jr. He was a 15-year-old boy who was looking forward to summer vacation and possibly starting a real job. This is how Olson lured him in. Olson actually tried to lure another victim, but the possible victim didn't accept his offer, which probably saved his life. The day Judy's body was found, July 25, 1981, Clifford Olson found his next victim. Her name was Sigrun Arndt, and she was a student visiting from Germany. She was seen talking to an older man who was Olson, and was only added to the list of victims after his confessions. Her body was found only 400 yards from where Simon Partington was discovered just the day before. Olson was now on a murder spree. 2 days later, on July 27th, Terry Lynn Carson was next. Olson used his usual methods, offering the young girl a ride with laced drink, possibly as a celebration for her getting hired for a job with him. He drove her, as he had the others, into the wilderness, where he strangled her, burned her clothes, and threw her purse and shoes into the river. At this time, Clifford Olson Jr. was a prime suspect in some of these murders and was under surveillance for a while, but the police had to stop as he was quickly onto them. Now we come to his last identified victim, Louise Chartrand. She was last seen on July 30th, 1981. Olson had met with the police and was supposed to meet with his lawyer that same day. He spotted the 17-year-old who had just moved to British Columbia from Quebec. It's believed he picked her up and then drugged her. Clifford then headed towards Whistler. On the way, he made a stop to try to pick up a gun that the Squamish police had confiscated, but had been unable to because there was no one available at the time to assist him. He then drove north past the ski resort to a gravel pit, where he smashed Louise's head in with a hammer and buried her in a shallow grave. As soon as she was reported late for her shift, the police were alerted and took immediate action suspecting foul play. This would be the end of Olson's killing spree, but not the end of the pain that he would inflict on the victims' families. After Louise went missing, Clifford once again became the prime suspect in the case of the missing Lower Mainland children. He was once again hard to follow, as he was still aware that he was a suspect. He would drive making sudden stops, U-turns, and changed rental cars frequently to avoid being followed. He eventually took a ferry over to Vancouver Island, where after robbing some houses, he picked up 2 female hitchhikers. A few hours later, his car was seen driving around erratically before turning off onto a dirt road. 2 RCMP squad cars blocked the entrance to the road, while 2 police officers followed the car into the bush. As the officers got closer, they could see 3 people sharing a bottle before Clifford started to get loud, yelling and insisting that one of the females follow him further into the woods. At this time, the officers decided to make themselves known and moved in to arrest him. Clifford saw them and managed to make it back to his car. He reversed back all the way he had came, only to be stopped by the other officers who had blocked his path. Clifford was then charged with impaired driving and put into custody. Upon searching his car, the police found a notebook that contained the name Judy Kozma. This was August 12th. By August 18th, Clifford was charged with the first-degree murder of Judy Kozma. Clifford Olson Jr. went on to make a full confession. That sounds like a good thing, but his confession came with a terrible proposition. Clifford not only confessed to Judy's murder, but said he would lead the police to 11 more bodies and evidence. The catch would be that he would only do it for the sum of $100,000, which would be the equivalent of $306,000 today. He also stated that he would give them the first victim as a freebie so that he would know he was telling the truth. He wanted the money to go to his wife. A secret deal was cut, and Olson led them to the missing bodies and locations where evidence was found. This deal would be made known to the media a year later, and the public was outraged. The fact that his wife Joan was still legally married to Clifford meant that he could potentially profit from this deal. Many wondered why this deal was made, but according to the Attorney General, this meant that Clifford could be guaranteed first-degree murder conviction because they had no evidence prior to this. January 11th, 1982, Clifford's trial began and came to a quick end just 3 days later when he changed his plea from not guilty to guilty. While this must have been a relief to the families, they were also very angry and upset over the fact that Olson would be benefiting financially from the murders. 7 of the families decided to sue Olson, his wife, and the lawyers that had assisted him in putting together this deal. Unfortunately, in 1984, the Supreme Court Justice decided to dismiss their case and the money was released. After serving 16 years of his life sentence, Clifford applied for the Faint Hope Clause, which stated that in exceptional circumstances, the public interest might not be served by keeping an offender in prison for more than 15 years, particularly where the individual is not a threat to society. This would have been impossible as those murders were committed in Seattle and he was imprisoned in Canada. It only took the jury 15 minutes to reject his appeal. He went into appeal again in 2006 and 2010. He was denied each time. In March 2010, Olson once again was in the media. This time it was because they found out that he was once again receiving money, around $1,000 for Canadian old age security, and he was also about to qualify for guaranteed income supplement. The government then looked into these payments and they were terminated. Because of Clifford Olson Jr., anyone charged with an offense that has been charged with life in prison can no longer apply for the faint hope clause or apply early for the parole after committing multiple murders after 2011 and 1997 respectively. Terminal cancer, and on September 30th, that same year, he died in a hospital in Quebec at the age of 71. So that was the story of Clifford Olson Jr., the Beast of BC. He died feeling no remorse, still trying to get money and trying to escape his punishment. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please let me know what you think of this in the comments below, and thank you for watching.